All right, what is going on, Ranger fans and hockey fans? Welcome to another offseason edition of the 407 Rangers. It is your host, Raymond Tapia. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and a comment. Turn on notifications as always. So, we have a lot to talk about with the New York Rangers because for the first time ever, you guys know how I feel about Chris Drury. I'm going to actually give Chris Drury his flowers for the first time ever in this channel. Yes, this is quite a shocker. Raymond Tapia is giving Chris Drury the flowers. Because I gotta say, even though Chris Drury had his flaws with some of the moves he did this season and a couple of other seasons, I'm not gonna sit here and act like he's a horrible GM at the contracts either because Chris Drury has actually been pretty good at getting out of these crazy, atrocious contracts. So I gotta give good credit where credit is due for Chris Drury when it comes to trying to get off these contracts from certain players that you know is just too much for the team. And he's actually been doing a good job. Not only that, even though he gave the Pittsburgh Penguins the first round draft pick, we still acquired some pretty good late round draft picks this season. So they were pretty much steals as well. And we didn't even get to mention on how he did the Keandre Miller trade. It was definitely a heist for the New York Rangers because, man, the amount of money the Carolina Hurricanes they're paying Keandre Miller is absolutely ridiculous. So the Rangers actually got a lot. So we're going to break down the Keandre Miller trade as well. And of course, you got the Gary Croft signing a 7-year deal. So we have a lot to talk about with this team, but you guys already know. First, we're going to start off with the draft picks, break down on pretty much each player that they picked, and we'll give you guys a scouting report on what they had to say about pretty much each individual player that was drafted by the team. So we'll start off with the round two. The round two of the 2025 pack in the pick 43rd, they had Malcolm Spence, which Malcolm Spence was actually a really good steal. I mean, I thought he was going to be a first rounder with the stats he has, but he's actually been a really good steal for the New York Rangers. He's a left winger. He was playing for the Erie Otters. Was considered a strong value pick as he was projected to be a first round talent, as they said in the report. And also in the third round, you had your pick number 70 and Sean Barnhill, and he is a big mobile defenseman as well. And then for another one from the same round, pick 89, Atram Gonchar. He is also another defensive man, the nephew of Sergei Gonchar, so pretty much related to the notorious player from back then. And you had the fourth round, they had Mikael Eriksson, the center. He's pretty much a small skill center. So you also had the fifth round with Zeb Lindgren. He's a defensive man with size and skating ability. He is no relation to Ryan Lindgren, though, so let's not get it twisted with that. And then also for the sixth round, you had Samuel Jung, right winger. He's pretty much a second year eligible player. And for the last pick, you had Evan Passmore, another large defenseman with skating skill ability as well. So pretty much the New York Rangers drafted a whole bunch of defensive men and wingers in this year's draft. But we'll pretty much do a breakdown of what each developmental scouting report said about each player. So we'll go ahead and do the report and what they said about each one. So for what the Rangers scouting report said, they said Malcolm Spence is a valuable prospect with a strong foundation in defensive play, physicality, a relentless work ethic. He projects as a solid middle six forward who can contribute in all three zones. While his offensive ceiling may not be as high as some other prospects, his strong defensive instincts, leadership, and competitiveness make him a player that coaches will appreciate and who can play a key role on a successful team. The key to his future success will lie in his ability to continue developing an offensive game and consistently utilize his strengths effectively. And also for Sean Barnhill, though not a high-end scorer, his passing has noticeably improved, allowing him to transition play effectively and make smart outlet passes under the pressure. His heavy physical style makes him tough to play against as he uses his size and strength to win puck battles and shut down the rush, which is actually what the Rangers need because we don't have too many guys that are like able to forecheck and bring a lot of physicality. Only a couple. But we still got to continue. We got Atram Gonchar, and this is what they said about him. A dynamic defensive man with swift hands and good puck skills. Atram Gonchar's game is interesting in all areas, but seriously lacks size, even if he plays bigger than what he is. So that's what they said about Gonchar pretty much, though. But Kjell Eriksson, he isn't overly physical, but he still plays a heavy game by getting to the dirty areas of the ice. He's smart with the puck and solid in all three zones, but needs to see that translate to the SHL and eventually the NHL for him to develop and become a lineup mainstay. In terms of value, this is a solid pick. And for Zeb Lindgren may not be a defender that will impress on the back end, as he only had 19 points in 38 games in the Junior 20 National games. Even though he may not have numbers, he is still effective in terms of being a reliable two-way presence on the back end with his defensive game and sound and steady presence as a defender. Now, Samuel Jung, they pretty much didn't have no scouting or stats for him, so I couldn't pretty much have a report on him. And last but not least, this is Evan Passmore's report. Evan Passmore projects as a potential shutdown defensive man at the pro level, utilizing his size and defensive acumen. While his offensive upside is considered limited, his defensive strength and steady play make him a valuable asset, and particularly on the penalty kill. The Rangers selected him as a good value pick for his skating and physical game. So there you go. That's pretty much the scouting report for the draft picks. But as you guys know, there is still a lot to talk about. This is probably going to be one of my longest videos in a while because of how much things Chris Drury has been doing. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So that's the scouting report for all the draft picks we have this season. And as I said, they're going to be pretty much a potential future, and we'll see what happens. I mean, if the Rangers can actually be good at developing players for once, they might have a real bright future, because we all know how the Kako project turned out, and it was just pretty much a disaster, unfortunately. And at this point, we just can't have another one of those kind of situations, even if they're late rounders, because for all we know, those late round picks could actually turn out to be really good players. They just haven't been developed the right way, and that's what we don't want to see from the Rangers. So, but we're going to keep going with the offseason pretty much with what they've been doing right after the draft picks. As you know, July 1st was a very busy day for the New York Rangers, so we'll break down what they did in yesterday's offseason moves. So the New York Rangers have been active during the 2025 offseason, making several key moves to strengthen their roster and address areas of need. Sorry, guys. They signed defensive man Vlasidov Garekrov to a long-term deal and traded defensive man Keandre Miller to the Hurricanes. They also re-signed for Will Cooley, which was a big signing because that's pretty much the player everybody was worried about, thinking he was going to walk to another team, but the Rangers got him blissfully and signed depth players like Taylor Radish and Derek Pullout. But there's a lot more other signings going on as well, but let's go ahead and break down the stats for Vlasidov Garekrov. Sorry, guys. His stats weren't too bad in the regular season, and this is why I feel like he's going to be a really good player pairing with Adam Fox. He had 5 goals and 25 assists, rounding up to 30 points for the regular season, so not too bad for a defensive man. In the playoffs, he had 2 assists, no goals, and -1. So they're not the best numbers, but what can you do? He wasn't with the Kings the whole season. He was just there right after the trade deadline. But still a good pickup, and he had a 7-year deal as well. So he's going to definitely be a really good pairing lineup with Adam Fox, I feel like, because as you know, Adam Fox is also a good passing defensive man. So I'm definitely looking forward to see how they play together, because this was definitely a steal because they didn't even have to give him that much money to sign as well. Now let's also talk about Taylor Radish from the Washington Capitals, because as y'all know, Chris Drury signed Taylor Radish to a 2-year deal. And let's break down his stats, what he did with the Capitals last season, because this is another pretty good player on the defensive end. He had 7 goals and 20 assists, rounding up to 27 points. In the playoffs, he played 7 games but only had 1 assist. which I feel like he's going to be a really good fourth or third pairing defensive man, so he won't be too bad of a guy to add into the lineup. And then you also had Scott Morrow, who was a former New Jersey Devil. His stats are pretty interesting. I mean, Carolina Hurricanes, my bad, guys. He actually has some interesting stats as well with the AHL and then transitioning to the NHL. So with the Chicago Wolves and the AHL team, he had 52 games played, 13 goals, and 26 assists, rounding up to 56 points. And with the Carolina Hurricanes, he had 14 games played, 1 goal, 5 assists, and 6 points, which isn't too bad at all if you just randomly just popped up from the AHL and you just happened to blend in and started scoring numbers in the NHL. That's not too bad at all in the middle of the season because the NHL is not that easy to score a goal. So the fact that he was playing spectacular in the AHL and then worked his way to that game into the NHL and still managed to score a goal out of all that is pretty impressive. Despite how young he is, he definitely has a lot of potential and a bright future if he's going to be playing like this. So that's a good pickup from the New York Rangers. So let's also break down the Will Cooley deal. Will Cooley has signed a 2-year contract extension with the New York Rangers, according to ESPN. The deal is reportedly worth $7.8 million, with an average annual value of $3.9 million. This extension prevents Cooley from potentially being signed to an offer sheet by another team as a restricted free agent. So we got Will Cooley for another 2 more seasons. Hopefully he's going to play better than he did last year because he did really good last year. And if he plays better this year, I definitely see a much more better season happening for the New York Rangers next season. So let's also break down the Keandre Miller deal, and that's pretty much what I'm going to have from what I've seen and heard so far from the New York Rangers. So the Keandre Miller deal, he was traded from the New York Rangers to the Carolina Hurricanes in a sign and trade deal. The Hurricanes acquired Miller, who then signed an 8-year, $60 million contract with an AAV of $7.5 million. This guy's going to be making $7.5 million a year, guys. In return, the Rangers received a conditional 2026 first-round pick, top 10 protected, and a 2026 second-round pick, and defenseman Scott Morrow. Now, for the first time in a long time, the Rangers finally got a second-round draft pick, which you guys know the Rangers, it's like mission impossible for them to gain a second-round pick. And the fact that they have a top 10 protected for next year's draft is definitely a steal for the New York Rangers because they can either use that to get a deal going for the next deadline and get a really good player, or they can actually draft somebody in this really good draft class upcoming for this year's, for the 2026 NHL draft. So Chris Drury definitely has some good options on his hands with all these deals happening. And that's pretty much all I got for you guys. I know it was a lot to talk about because we had a lot going on outside the channel, and thankfully I managed to finally squeeze in the time to give you guys all the details of what's been going on with the front office of this team. And we're going to pretty much keep it going as well, see what happens from this week and so on, because I'm pretty sure Chris Drury is not done. And I'll do a separate video and give you guys a breakdown of the stats of each individual player that was drafted by the New York Rangers as well, and try to do like highlights and things like that. So I'll give you guys an update when I upload the next video of the draft picks and their stats and what they're good at and their flaws. But thank you guys for tuning in. I know this was a long video, but I really appreciate your patience as always. And as always, let's go Rangers.